When you stop coming from a place of desperation, you begin to discover something profound about how life actually works. Every time you beg, every time you plead, every time you find yourself running after someone who's pulling away, you are operating from an energy of lack. You are declaring to the universe that you are not enough without their attention, without their validation, without their presence. And what happens when you affirm lack? You attract more lack. The harder you chase, the faster it all seems to slip through your fingers. People feel it even they can't explain it. They sense that desperate pull, that grasping energy, and instinctively they recoil. They withdraw because desperation never feels safe, never feels stable, never feels attractive. It is the energy of scarcity, and scarcity always repels. But when you shift from desperation to magnetism, everything begins to change. Magnetism is not about forcing. It is not about controlling. It is not about convincing someone to notice you. Magnetism is about becoming so centered in who you are, so rooted in your own worth that you naturally draw people in. Think about how a magnet works. It doesn't strain. It doesn't struggle. It doesn't run after what it wants. It simply is. It exists in its own power. And by existing in that power, it attracts without effort. That is the same energy when you stop begging, stop chasing, stop reaching in desperation, and instead cultivate strength, confidence, and calm assurance. The truth is most people live their lives trying to be chosen. They believe if they call enough times, if they text quickly enough, if they prove their devotion loudly enough, then someone will finally stay. But this approach never works for long because at its root is fear. Fear that if you don't chase, they will forget you. Fear that if you don't beg, they will abandon you. Fear that if you don't constantly remind them you exist, you will lose them. That fear eats away at your dignity. It steals your peace. It makes you look outward for what only can be built inward. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine stepping into a space where you no longer feel the need to convince anyone of your value. You don't chase because you are already enough. You don't beg because you and your worth isn't up for negotiation. You don't run after people who are walking away because you know what is aligned with you will always meet you halfway. That kind of calm assurance is magnetic. People sense it. They are drawn to it because it is rare. Most people are entangled in insecurity and fear. So when they meet someone radiating confidence without arrogance, peace without passivity, certainty without control, it feels like a breath of fresh air. Magnetism is a decision, not a chance. You decide to no longer waste your energy proving yourself to those who do not see you. You decide to turn that same energy inward, building yourself, growing yourself, sharpening your mind, strengthening your spirit. When you do this, you move from needing others to want you, to becoming the kind of person others want to be near. Your presence becomes the invitation. You are not calling, you are not begging, you are not running after anyone, and yet doors open, opportunities come. Relationships deepen, and respect flows your way. Think about how people treat those who know their value. They don't walk all over them. They don't take them for granted. They are careful, they are respectful, they are attentive, because they recognize that this is someone who doesn't need them to survive. This is someone who is whole within themselves, and that wholeness is irresistible. Desperation screams weakness. Magnetism whispers strength. Desperation clings. Magnetism releases. Desperation tries to hold on tightly. Magnetism allows things to flow naturally. It is not about pretending to be strong or secretly desperate inside. It is about truly shifting your energy, changing the way you see yourself, and understanding that your worth has nothing to do with who stays or who leaves. It is unshakable. When you embrace that truth, your entire presence changes. You no longer feel the impulse to chase because you realize nothing worth having needs to be chased. You no longer feel the compulsion to beg because you understand that if someone does not recognize your worth, it is their loss, not yours. Magnetism is cultivated by alignment, aligning your thoughts, your emotions, your actions with the reality you want to create. If you constantly affirm lack, you stay in lack. If you constantly affirm rejection, you attract rejection. But if you affirm abundance, if you affirm worthiness, if you affirm that you are enough, you start to radiate that truth. People don't respond to what you say, they respond to what you embody. You can say all the right words, but if inside you are desperate, people will feel it. If inside you are secure, people feel that too. When you stop being desperate for people's attention, you begin to notice how your energy frees up. Suddenly you have more time, more focus, more clarity to build your vision, to pursue your goals, to develop your mind and spirit. And the more you do this, the stronger your magnetic pull becomes. Instead of chasing after one person who doesn't value you, you find yourself surrounded by opportunities, by people who do see you, by doors that open because you chose to stop knocking on the ones that were never meant for you. This is the great paradox. When you no longer need it, it begins to come to you. When you no longer chase, it starts to pursue you. When you no longer beg, people start offering you what you once thought you had to demand. It is not magic. It is alignment. It is the way energy works. You don't get what you want by running after it in desperation. You get it by becoming the person who naturally attracts it. When you operate from a place of value, everything about the way you move, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself transforms. Too many people spend their energy trying to prove that they are worthy of someone else's attention. They think if they give enough, sacrifice enough, bend themselves enough, eventually they'll be noticed, loved, and accepted. But the problem with that way of living is that it communicates one message over and over again. You don't believe you are valuable as you are. And if you don't believe you are valuable, why would anyone else? Operating from a place of value is not about arrogance. It is not about walking around with your nose in the air. It is about deep recognition of your worth. A recognition that is unshakable regardless of who validates you or who doesn't. Consider the difference between begging for attention and embodying value. Begging says, I need you to complete me. I need you to tell me I'm enough. I need you to fill this emptiness inside of me. But value says, I already know who I am. I already know what I bring to the table. Whether you recognize it or not, I am whole, I am strong, I am enough. That shift in energy is enormous. When you beg, you shrink yourself to fit into someone else's approval. When you embody value, you expand beyond the need for approval altogether. You don't wait to be chosen. You live in a way that shows you've already chosen yourself. Think about how the most magnetic individuals in the world carry themselves. They don't run after anyone. They don't cling to validation. And they certainly don't waste time trying to convince people of their worth. They are simply immersed in their purpose, their growth, their contribution. And because they are so rooted in value, others naturally want to be in their orbit. That's the key. Value is attractive. Not because it tries to attract, but because it cannot be ignored. When someone is confident in their skills, their vision, their direction, they exude a quiet strength. They don't have to say, notice me. People notice anyway. Operating from value requires you to stop negotiating with your self-worth. Too often, people tie their value to the reactions they get from others. If someone replies quickly to a text, they feel valuable. If someone ignores them, they feel worthless. If someone praises them, they feel on top of the world. If someone criticizes them, they feel like nothing. That roller coaster will destroy your sense of self because you've put the control of your worth in someone else's hands. Value doesn't fluctuate like that. True value is stable, constant, unwavering. It doesn't matter who recognizes it because it is already established. When you operate from value, you stop chasing validation and start focusing on contribution. You ask yourself, how can I grow? How can I give? How can I become better than I was yesterday? And every time you invest in yourself, every time you sharpen your skills, every time you expand your mind, your value multiplies. And here's the secret: the more valuable you become to yourself, the more valuable you become to others. People can sense when you carry yourself with dignity. They can sense when you know what you're worth, and they treat you accordingly. Operating from value also changes the dynamics of your relationships. When you come from desperation, you tolerate disrespect, you settle for less, you accept crumbs, you tell yourself it's better to have something even if it's unhealthy than nothing. But when you operate from value, you no longer allow mistreatment to stay in your life. You raise the standard. You don't fear losing someone who can't respect you because you know you are worthy of so much more. You understand that losing what diminishes you is actually gaining freedom to attract what truly aligns with your worth. The way you see yourself sets the tone for how the world sees you. If you operate from lack, people will treat you like you are lacking. If you operate from value, people will rise to meet that value. It's a mirror effect. Life reflects back to you what you continually project. When you declare through your actions, through your choices, through your standards that you are valuable, you attract people, opportunities, and circumstances that recognize and amplify that truth. Now, value doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you have to have it all figured out, or that you have to wait until you achieve some external milestone before you believe in yourself. Value is not about where you are, but about who you are. It's about understanding that even in your process, even in your growth, even in your mistakes, you are still worthy, you are still enough, you are still deserving of respect. The more you own that truth, the more powerful your presence becomes. Operating from value frees you from games, from manipulation, from chasing after what is running away. You don't need to force anyone to stay. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth. You don't need to beg for someone to recognize what is already evident. Your focus shifts entirely inward toward becoming the best version of yourself. And when you operate from that space, when you live in that frequency, the right people, the right opportunities, the right doors begin to align with you. They find you because you become the kind of person worth finding. When you master the art of silence in space, you begin to tap into a power that most people overlook. The majority of people in today's world are so quick to respond, so eager to fill every gap, so desperate to keep the conversation going, that they smother any chance for respect or curiosity to grow. They believe constant pursuit shows interest, but in reality it communicates fear. Silence, on the other hand, speaks louder than words ever can. When you don't rush to text back, when you don't jump to call, when you don't fill every pause with noise, you create space. And in that space, people begin to wonder. They begin to think. They begin to feel the absence of your presence in a way they never could. If you were always there, always available, always reaching out. Silence is not weakness. It is not indifference. It is strategy. It is knowing that energy unspoken often carries more influence than words repeated endlessly. There is a mystery in silence that pulls people in. Curiosity grows when someone realizes you're not so easily accessible, when they realize you are not desperate to keep their attention, when they sense that your life is moving with or without them. That mystery becomes magnetism. People cannot help but be intrigued by what is not immediately revealed. Space is equally powerful. When you stop chasing, when you don't bombard someone with constant calls or messages, you create breathing room. You allow them the chance to miss you, the chance to feel what life is like without your consistent presence. Most people never give space because they are terrified that if they don't keep reaching out, they will be forgotten. But the truth is the opposite. When you never give space, you become taken for granted. You become background noise, always there, always clinging. Space disrupts that pattern. It forces the other person to notice the void, to realize that your presence is not guaranteed, to understand that you are not holding on tightly in fear. There is a deep confidence that radiates from someone who can embrace silence without anxiety, who can give space without fear. That confidence says, I don't need to fill every gap with my voice. I don't need to constantly remind you I exist. I know who I am, and I know my presence speaks for itself. People respect that. They respond to it because it feels rare. In a world obsessed with instant replies and constant validation, silence and space stand out as strength. Think of how many times someone only realized your value after you stopped making yourself so available. The moment you pulled back, the moment you chose not to chase, suddenly they remembered your worth. They began to ask, why aren't they calling? Why aren't they texting? Where do they go? That's the power of space. It creates awareness. People often need to feel your absence before they can fully appreciate your presence. Silence sharpens that awareness even more because it forces to sit with their own thoughts, their own curiosity, their own recognition that you are not waiting by the phone, desperate for their attention. This doesn't mean you play games or manipulate with silence. True power is never about manipulation. It is about alignment. Silence and space are about self-respect, about knowing that you don't need to overextend to prove your value. They are about letting the natural rhythm of connection breathe instead of suffocating it with neediness. When you embrace this, you shift the entire dynamic. Instead of being the one who chases, you become the one who attracts. Instead of being the one who constantly reaches out, you are the one others feel compelled to reach out to. Silence also has another benefit. It allows you to hear yourself more clearly. When you are not always talking, texting, or chasing, you begin to listen inward. You start to hear your intuition, to recognize what you truly feel, to connect with your own desires and standards. Constant communication can drown out that inner voice, leaving you blind to red flags, blind to misalignment, blind to the truth of whether the connection is even worth pursuing. But silence clears the noise. It gives you perspective. It helps you step back and evaluate from a place of strength rather than fear. Space works the same way. It not only allows others to reflect on your value, but also allows you to reflect on theirs. When you're constantly wrapped up in pursuing someone, you don't give yourself the room to truly see whether they even deserve your energy. But when you create space, you get clarity. You see whether they step into the gap or whether they vanish completely. And that information is powerful. It shows you who is truly invested and who only entertained your presence because it was always available. The most powerful individuals in relationships, in business, in life, are the ones who understand the value of holding silence and allowing space. They don't rush to fill every moment. They don't chase validation, and they don't fear the pause. They recognize that silence builds strength, space builds respect, and together they cultivate magnetism. When you learn this art, you realize you never have to overextend yourself to be valued. You simply have to be secure enough to let the silence speak and the space reveal the truth. When you begin focusing on building your inner world, you step into a dimension of power that most people never access. So many individuals are alive chasing external validation, wanting the text back, the call return, the compliment, the invitation, the approval. They make their happiness dependent on what is happening outside of them. But the truth is, the outside will always reflect what's happening on the inside. If you're honest, chaotic, insecure, and unstable, it doesn't matter how much attention or validation you receive. It will never feel enough. You'll always want more. You'll always fear losing it. You'll always be chasing. But when your inner world is strong, centered, and grounded, you no longer need to cling to what's outside of you. Instead, you radiate an energy that naturally pulls the right people and opportunities in. Building your inner world is about self-investment at the deepest level. It's about feeding your mind with knowledge, training your emotions with discipline, strengthening your spirit with stillness, and shaping your character with integrity. It means asking yourself, what am I pouring into my mind every day? Am I building beliefs that empower me, or am I feeding doubt, fear, and scarcity? Because whatever you feed internally will manifest externally. If you tell yourself you're not enough, you will live in ways that seek external validation to compensate. If you affirm your worth, you will carry yourself with dignity, and others will recognize it without you ever having to beg for it. The inner world is where self-respect is born. When you have taken the time to develop yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you don't settle for scrap. You don't tolerate disrespect. You don't lower your standards to keep someone around. Why? Because you know your value is not negotiable. You know that peace of mind, purpose, and growth are worth more than temporary attention. You know that your worth isn't defined by who stays or who leaves, but by the work you've done within yourself. And when that realization sinks in, your actions, your energy, and your presence completely transform. Think about a person with no inner foundation is easily shaken. A single rejection can break them. One unanswered message can ruin their confidence. One disapproving comment can crush their self-esteem. They are like a house built on sand, unstable, fragile, dependent on external conditions to stay standing. But someone who has built their inner world is like a fortress. They are rooted steady, unmovable. Rejection doesn't destroy them, it redirects. Silence doesn't weaken them, it strengthens their patience. Criticism doesn't shatter them, it refines their focus. That's the difference between living from the outside and then living from the inside out. Focusing on your inner world also changes what you pursue. Instead of chasing people, you start chasing growth. Instead of begging for attention, you start building vision. Instead of obsessing over who likes you, you start asking how you can elevate yourself. And as you grow in this way, the irony is that the very things you use to chase start chasing you. Opportunities notice you. People notice you. Respect follows you. Why? Because the external is always a mirror of the internal. When you are full inside, You become magnetic outside. Building your inner world also demands discipline. It's not easy to sit with yourself, to confront your insecurities, to change old thought patterns, to break destructive habits. It's not easy to invest time in reading, journaling, reflecting, meditating, or training your body and mind when distractions are everywhere. But that discipline is what separates the ones who are constantly dependent on others from the ones who stand tall in their independence. Every time you discipline yourself to grow internally, you create a foundation that no external circumstance can shake. Another truth about building your inner world is that it gives you clarity. When you're empty inside, you can't see clearly. You'll mistake attention for love, manipulation for care, control for commitment. But when you're strong inside, you see through all of it. You no longer confuse someone's temporary interest with genuine investment. You no longer fall for someone's words if their actions don't align. You no longer accept less than you deserve because you're afraid of being alone. That clarity only comes from the inner work, from knowing yourself so deeply that you cannot be fooled by surface-level appearances. Your inner world is also where your peace lies. When you neglect it, you're constantly restless, anxious, worried about what people think, afraid of losing what you have. But when you cultivate it, peace becomes your natural state, and peace is powerful. Peace allows you to respond instead of react. Peace allows you to wait instead of chase. Peace allows you to walk away when something isn't right because you know you're not losing yourself in the process. Peace makes you magnetic as others feel safe around you. They feel your stability, your calm, your strength, and they are drawn to it in a world where most people are frantic, needy, and unstable. Building your inner world doesn't mean you ignore the outer world. It means you understand that the outer is only a reflection. You stop trying to fix everything outside and set focus on what is within. And as you do that, life shifts. The relationships you attract shift. The opportunities you encounter shift. The respect you receive shifts. Because the truth has always been simple. Your outer world is a projection of your inner world. When you raise your standards, you send a message to yourself and to the world that you will no longer accept anything that falls short of the value you know you carry. Too many people lower their standards in hopes of being accepted, in hopes of being chosen, in hopes of keeping someone who doesn't even respect them. They shrink what they want. They compromise their principles. They sacrifice their peace, all to maintain connections that are unworthy of them. But when you live like that, you betray yourself. You teach yourself that being chosen is more important than being true to who you are. And once you start betraying yourself, you set a dangerous precedent. Others begin to betray you too. Raising your standards is not about being rigid, arrogant, or impossible to please. It's about honoring your worth enough to say, this is the minimum I will accept in my life. It's about knowing what kind of love, respect, and treatment align with your value and refusing to tolerate less. When you raise the standards, you automatically filter out the people who are not meant to stay. Those who are only around to take advantage, those who come with half effort, those who play game, they will not survive in the atmosphere of higher standards. And that is exactly what you want. Your standards protect your energy. They protect your time. They protect your heart. The truth is, life will always give you what you are willing to settle for. If you settle for disrespect, you will continue to receive disrespect. If you settle for inconsistency, inconsistency will define your relationships. If you settle for crumbs, you'll never taste the fullness of what love and respect really are. But when you raise your standards, everything changes. People either rise to meet them or when they fall away. And when they fall away, it isn't a loss. It is a clearing. It is life removing what was never aligned with you to make space for what truly is. Many people fear raising their standards because they think it will leave them alone. They believe that if they demand more, no one will be able to meet it. But that belief comes from a place of scarcity, not truth. The reality is that raising your standards doesn't isolate you, it elevates you. Yes, you may lose some people, but those people were never going to give you what you deserve anyway. What you gain instead are relationships, opportunities, and connections that meet you where you are. People who respect your boundaries, people who value your time, people who see your worth without you having to beg for it. Raising your standards also transforms the way you see yourself. Each time you refuse to lower them, you reinforce the belief that you are worthy. You show yourself that you are not afraid to walk away, not afraid to demand respect, not afraid to stand alone if necessary. That builds confidence. It builds strength. It builds dignity. You stop needing others to validate you because your own standards become the evidence of your value. And once you operate from that level of self-respect, the world cannot help but treat you differently. Think about it this way. If you walk into a store that displays quality products at premium prices, you don't expect to negotiate for pennies. You understand that the value is non-negotiable. But if a store sells everything cheap, people walk in expecting bargains, discounts, and deals. The same is true for how you present yourself. If your standards are low, people will treat you cheaply. If your standards are high, people either pay the price of respect or they walk away. And that is how it should be. Raising your standards doesn't just apply to relationships. It applies to every area of life. It means refusing to tolerate mediocrity in your work, in your habits, in your goals. It means pushing yourself to demand more of yourself, not just of others. When you hold yourself to a higher standard, you grow. You develop discipline. You stop procrastinating. You start honoring your word. And as you raise the standard for yourself, the quality of everything around you begins to rise too. You attract better opportunities because you're operating at a higher frequency. You achieve more because you refuse to settle for laziness or half effort. You become someone others admire because you live by principles that most are too afraid to embrace. It's important to understand that raising your standards is an ongoing process. As you grow, as you evolve, as you gain clarity about who you are and what you deserve, your standards must evolve with you. What was acceptable at one stage of your life will no longer be acceptable at another. And that's a good thing. It means you are expanding. You are leveling up. You are demanding more from life because you have become more. Too many people hold on to outdated standards, keeping themselves tied to situations that no longer match their growth. But when you are courageous enough to keep raising them, you ensure that you never outgrow your life. Every time you decide to raise your standards, you might face resistance. People will call you too much. They'll say you're asking for something unrealistic. They'll try to guilt you into settling. But remember, their reaction is not about your worth. It is about their limitations. Those who cannot meet your standards will always try to convince you to lower them. But you are not here to make people comfortable with giving you less. You are here to create a life that matches the greatness within you. And that requires standards that reflect who you truly are, not what others are willing to give. Attracting through alignment rather than pursuit is one of the most powerful shifts you can make in your life. The natural tendency for most people is to chase what they want, to run after with desperation, to push and pull until they feel they've secured it. But when you pursue relentlessly, you often do so from a place of lack. You are declaring to yourself and to the world that what you want is outside of you, separate from you, distant from you, and that you must expend all your energy chasing it down. That energy doesn't create harmony, it creates resistance. The more you chase, the more it runs, the more it pulls away. And this cycle leaves you drained, frustrated, and often empty-handed. Attraction through alignment is the opposite. It is not about sitting back passively, waiting for things to happen, but about becoming the kind of person who naturally grows what you desire. Instead of chasing love, you embody love. Instead of begging for respect, you live with self-respect. Instead of running after opportunities, you develop yourself into the kind of individual opportunities cannot ignore. Alignment means your thoughts, your actions, your emotions, and your energy are in harmony with what you seek. When those are aligned, what you desire begins to flow to you without the strain of pursuit. Consider the way a magnet works. It doesn't run after the pieces of metal, trying to pull them in through force. It simply exists in its nature, and because of its nature, attraction is inevitable. That's exactly how alignment operates. When you align with confidence, with growth, with peace, with clarity, you don't need to beg anyone to come close. People feel the pull of your energy. They feel the stability you carry. They feel the strength that radiates without you saying a word. That kind of alignment is irresistible because it is rare in a world full of people who are chasing instead of becoming. Alignment requires inner honesty. You cannot claim you want a healthy relationship while tolerating toxic patterns. You cannot say you want success while living in laziness and procrastination. You cannot declare abundance while constantly affirming scarcity. Life responds to who you are, not just what you say you want. This is why so many people feel stuck. They say the right things. They wish for the right things, but internally they are misaligned. Their habits don't match their desires. Their standards don't match their words. Their energy doesn't match their vision. And because of that, they attract the very things they don't want, while the things they do want remain out of reach. The beauty of alignment is that once you shift it, everything changes. When you align with love for yourself, you stop entertaining people who can't give you real love. When you align with abundance, you stop clinging to scarcity, and opportunities begin to multiply. When you align with peace, you no longer tolerate chaos. And suddenly your life becomes calmer, more stable, more fulfilling. You no longer have to chase respect, love, opportunities, or recognition because your energy calls it to you naturally. Attracting through alignment also teaches patience. Pursuit often comes from fear. Fear of missing out, fear of being left behind, fear of being forgotten. But alignment comes from trust. It is rooted in the understanding that what is meant for you will find you if you are truly aligned with it. That trust allows you to release the desperation, to stop forcing outcomes, to let go of the need to control every detail. And in that release, you make room for what is truly yours to arrive. When you are aligned, you know you don't have to beg or chase because what belongs to you cannot be lost. This doesn't mean you stop taking action. Alignment is not passivity. It is active growth, active discipline, active commitment to becoming your best self. But the difference is that your actions come from a place of confidence, not fear. You are no longer acting out of desperation to grab what you don't believe you already have. You are acting out of certainty that what you want is already aligned with who you are becoming. That certainty makes your energy calm, strong, magnetic. Another truth about attraction through alignment is that it gives you clarity about what is truly for you. When you're chasing, you're so focused on trying to get something or someone that you don't stop to ask whether it even matches who you are. But when you live in alignment, mismatches situations and naturally fall away. People who are not in harmony with your energy won't stick. Opportunities that don't align with your purpose won't last. This filtering process isn't rejection, it's protection. It's life removing what doesn't serve you so that what does can come into place. When you attract through alignment, you realize you don't need to fight for a seat at the table. You build your own table. You don't need to beg for someone's attention. You command respect with your presence. You don't need to run after opportunities. You prepare yourself so thoroughly that opportunities chase you. You live in a state of confidence that says, I am enough, I am ready, and I am aligned with the life I want. That's where true attraction lies.